Are you struggling in your faith? Are you pretending you're happy but stuck in a spiritual rut? Are you tired of listening to famous pastors and preachers who make it sound so easy? Welcome to Broken Catholic, the #1 Protestant and Catholic voice in America. I talk about the important things that nobody else is talking about, like how to align with God's plan for your life, because I believe this is where 90% of Christians get stuck. And I tackle the negative self-talk that we all secretly struggle with but won't admit. My guests are brave Protestants and Catholics who share their struggles, their fears, and their daily holy habits that help them win in their spiritual lives. I'm your host, your coach, your friend, Joseph Warren. I'm also a broken Catholic and former atheist, and a spiritual coach to Christian business owners and CEOs who are married with children. This show was created for you, the broken Catholic who's pushing to get your spouse, your kids, and yourself to heaven. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey, you're just one surrender prayer away. Today, my featured guest is Dieula Previlon. She is the founder and executive director of Elevate Her International Ministries with a vision to empower women to heal from trauma. She is a pastor and preacher, counselor, life coach, entrepreneur, and leader. Her professional career in pastoring, counseling, leading, and international ministry spans over 20 years. Now, Dieula is currently the associate pastor at Redeemer Evangelical Covenant Church, where she leads mission initiatives and racial justice ministry. And boy, oh boy, do we need that now. She is also a counselor and life coach in private practice. She currently lives in Carrollton, Texas with her husband and best friend and cheerleader. He's her partner in ministry for 21 years now, and they have 3 amazing young adult sons. You can find her at juliaprevilon.com. We may need to spell that out. It's Julia, yes, but it's spelled with a D. So it's DIEULA, Previlon.com. You'll find it in the show notes. Just click on the link and you can check her out. So Julia, welcome to Broken Catholic. Go ahead and fill in some of the gaps in that intro, would you?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I think the intro is dead on. The only part we did not put in the bio is that I was born in Haiti, hence the name, which is one of the reasons the name is so hard to pronounce in America. Was born in Haiti, grew up in New Jersey. So that's a little bit of my background as well.
So just to clarify, you have a Haitian and Jersey accent mixed together.
I do.
Oh, God bless us
And now
all.
Texan. A little bit. You'll hear the y'all from Texas.
Isn't that fun? I live in the South now in Tampa, and a lot of my New York accent has dissipated. It seems the influence down here was stronger than New York. So
it happens. We assimilate. Whether we want to or not, we end up assimilating.
I definitely think that's true. So let's start out. Share something personal about you that very few people in your business life actually know.
I think for me, the who that I am today is birthed out of who I've been and where I've been. Part of my passion for doing the work that I do is because I grew up in Haiti. It's because I grew up as an immigrant here in America, because I faced so many challenges that now I believe, I am placed in a position where I am able to help others, to hear the stories of others differently, because I have been through that. And I think part of the reason I am a grace-filled minister, a grace-filled counselor and coach, when people come to me, they experience the ministry of presence, partly because of where I've been, growing up in Haiti, where you've dealt with poverty and challenges as a woman, as a Black woman, and you come here in America, you deal with even more challenges, and there were so many things that you're lacking of, and then you go to institutions to get an education, and then challenges there. So for me, I believe my ministry and my calling is to utilize all of what I've been through, the good and the bad, the hard and the easy, and to embody all of that and support those that I serve today, whether it be in the church, in the counseling office, or protesting, or whatever it is that I do. I do it because of my story, of what I've been
Mm, I
through. Yeah.
get that. You know, so many people, I think they're out in ministry and they're uh, serving people that have deep traumas, deep hurts, deep wounds that go back for years, sometimes 10, 20, 30, 40 years. They haven't been healed yet. And these people that are ministering to them, some of them haven't gone through trauma, you know, similar to those people they're ministering to. Do you think that's a disservice? In other words, do I need to have more trauma than my clients in order to properly serve my clients?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I was recently reading the book by Richard Rohr, Falling Upward, where he talks about the first half of life and the second half of life. And his thing is, the best pastors are the pastors that become pastors in the second half of life. Because in the first half of life, you're still trying to figure it out. You still trying to figure out who you are, what you believe, and all of that. And for many people, they haven't gone through many things in the first half of life. By the second half of life, you have gone through some stuff. If you're doing life well, if you're doing life well, you would have gone through betrayal, through some kind of traumatic situation, whether it be primary trauma or secondary trauma. You would have gone through somebody cheating your goods, or disrespecting you, or demeaning you. You would have gone through some pain. And I agree with Richard, because those things are actually, those challenges cause us to mature, cause us to listen differently, cause us to show compassion differently. They cause us to approach the human spirit and humanity differently. Um, Although I don't necessarily think that you have to be a mother to understand mothers, or you have to be a father to understand the fathers, or you have to go through all kinds of trauma to understand trauma. I do think you have to, something had to have happened to cause your heart to be broken, or to cause your heart to slow your pace as to how you approach different situations, from being judgmental to being understanding, from being having all the answers to saying I don't know, but I sit with you. So something had to have happened to create that heart of compassion, whether it be trauma, whether it be betrayal, I don't know, but something had to have happened there. An encounter should have happened, like
Mm.
Paul on the Damascus road. There had to have been an encounter to get you to that place. I don't know what you call that encounter. It could be trauma, but it could be just an encounter with God, with yourself, with something, to cause you to change, to move, to change the trajectory of where you are as a child to a mature being. And I believe maturity causes us to approach humanity differently. Yeah.
Mm. That's powerful. I like that you use St. Paul, road to Damascus, gets knocked off the horse. And I
Yes.
think that's what needs to happen in our life. I agree with you.
Yeah.
We need to get knocked off of our horse somewhere in our life, or off of our throne, because
Yeah.
many of us occur very self-righteous, or we occur as our own God in our own universe, running our own
Yeah.
life with our own plans and schemes.
Absolutely. And
And
that's what
yeah.
Richard Rohr say. I'm sorry, Joseph. What he says is that in the first half of life, we're trying to build these empires. Where our focus is education, trying to be successful, trying to win at everything. And then you get to the second half of life, you're like, what have I been doing with my life? So there has to be an encounter that changes your trajectory from building these empires to serving and giving it all away, and supporting others.
So let's get right into that. What was your specific encounter where you realized this is the moment, this is the shift, this is where I have to give it all up, all these empires I'm building or these thrones I'm building for myself? You got knocked off. What was that encounter? Share with us that story.
Yeah, I've had a few. The very first was probably the birth of my son. I grew up in a Haitian context. Even here in America, our community was Haitian. For the survival of the immigrant, you need these mono ethnic communities, these homogenous communities. And so that was our life. And so our church was a Baptist Haitian church. And I went off to college. I was probably the first in our church to go off to college as a woman because, yeah. And to go and live in a dorms too, which is something the immigrant population is frightened of this new world for so many reasons. They're afraid for their children to assimilate, afraid for their children to go too far from our context. Of fear is just like what drives immigrants. Many immigrants, I would say. I won't say all. Um, for me, I went off to college, and my last semester of college, I became pregnant, and that is a no-no. In the Haitian community, I wasn't married. My husband and I, we're married now, but we weren't thinking of marriage. And for a woman to be the first to go to college, the first to leave, our little Haitian bubble in America. Um, their desires for me was to achieve the American dream, to be pregnant out of wedlock without being married, without a plan, without a job. It's not necessarily your perfect idea of the American dream, right? Um, and so I became pregnant, and I wanted to have my child. And so my husband and I, we had a conversation, and we both ended up having to tell our parents that we're expecting and we want to keep this child. That was what, 21. It's probably the first and probably the only time I saw my father cry. And I think his tears had to do about the broken American dream. We bring these children here to achieve the American dream, and this one became close. She's in college. She was close to graduating college, and she's pregnant with a child. What is she gonna do with a child? That experience in and of itself taught me a lot about myself that I've taken with me throughout my life. Um, there are some decisions that will be very difficult, and you will never see how it's going to play out, because I didn't know how this was going to play out. I had no job, said nothing like that. And B, to be courageous in making however difficult. And I'm in a place right now. I'm a therapist. I see women all the time dealing with pregnancy, and their choice is their choice. It's not mine for me to make for them, but I sit with them, and I love them, and I support them, and I let them cry it out, and I'm this presence for them to just encourage them in whatever decision they make. But for me, my decision to have my son was probably the most courageous um, act that created the trajectory for me to make other courageous decisions, right, in my life. And it required me to face my community. My community were pretty hard on me. They were very hard on me. I was basically excommunicated from the church for a while. I couldn't take communion until after my son was born. You know, when my husband and I decided to get married, they married us in the basement of the church, not in the church itself. Um, and so lots of humiliation, and we knew it going in that making this decision would be like literally the death of me, but it was by far the best decision I have ever made in my entire life. Our son is 22 now. He's almost done with college, and every time I look at him, I'm reminded um, of um, of sacrificial love, and just the tenacity and to be courageous, to dare to choose different from what my community said I'm supposed to choose. So I dared to choose. I dared to be courageous in the midst of all of the challenges, and I chose something that's changed. And his birth changed my entire life. I think that's why we're having this conversation right now. Because of his birth. So that was the first for me. That was my first Damascus where I met Jesus. I met Jesus back in my faith, and he
Let's
changed
go
my life.
there. Let's go there for a moment. During all that humiliation from your own community based on one decision you made that did not
Mhm.
meet their expectations, and then you made another decision to do the right thing in the consequence of that original decision, and have that baby and bring that child to life. God bless you and your husband. During all the humiliation, I know what that's like. I know what that feels like personally.
Mm.
Where was God showing up for you in your life? Where was he becoming present? Where were you cooperating with him?
Yeah,
Tell us
yeah,
about that.
that's a good question. Um, you know, at first, I felt like I needed to be punished. You know, because my context and my community was telling me that God is nowhere near, you know, because I did the wrong thing, you know. And it took me some time to realize that that's not true. God is so ever present in my life. And I think that's what gave me the courage to continue to take steps, because I felt the presence of God. I felt the presence of God in one of my college friends when I told her that I was pregnant, and I was contemplating whether to have the baby or not. Um, and I knew God showed himself strong through her, because the conversation she had with me solidified that I needed to have this baby. You know, she encouraged me, and Vanessa is her name, and she's passed with cancer several years ago. But I knew that she was God breathed. I knew she was God breathed. And this woman, you know, she wasn't like a church goer or anything like that. She was just an average woman, you know, a college friend, and she spoke life to me. And I knew it was God. I just knew, because you know, college friends at that point, they're not mature enough to give life-giving, you know, advice to the point of creating life. Um, but she gave me advice that I knew it was God, because she told me, you can have this child. And she saw that I wanted to have my child, and I was scared to death of facing my community. But she said, you can do it. Her When my sister, my older sister, saw I was in so much pain, she she also spoke life into me. She said, what do you want? And people don't ask Black women what they want to do. They don't ask us questions, they make decisions for us. And so for her to ask, how can I help? What do you want to do? That gave me life. And there were a couple from our community that showed up, and they were just present. They brought gifts, they brought a card, they brought conversation, and they brought grace, you know. And I knew it was God. And so their presence, them speaking life into me, I knew God was with me. I'm writing a book on trauma and the story of Hagar. Um, in this whole scenario that we're talking about now, of course it's in the book because this was my Damascus road, turning around and meeting Jesus, and just reflecting on that, and reflecting of the fingerprints of God throughout that journey to leading me to this very moment now has been just amazing to just reflect on where God has been, especially when your community says no, and your community reject you and shame you, and to see God saying, yes, I'm for you. I'm for this child that you are carrying. I'm breathing this child to life. And so it's been the thing that I believe that's led me um, to these positions that I've carried as a pastor, as a counselor, as a coach, helping other women and supporting other women through their seasons.
Mm. A few thoughts came up as you're speaking that. And the first thought was that lie that was being spoken to you during that time in your life, that because you made that decision, right? You got pregnant, right? You made that
Yeah.
choice as a young girl, and now you have the consequences. The lie was that because you've sinned, I'm putting my own language to it, but
Oh, yeah.
because you've sinned, you are now far away from God, and God has removed Himself from you. And I clearly have learned in my life that that is a lie from the enemy. And what
Yes.
is true that you recognize, and I'll just put some language to it, God draws closer to the sinner than He does to the saint.
Absolutely.
God draws closer to the sinner than He does to the saint. And there's so many accounts in the Bible where Jesus speaks about the self-righteous man versus the guy who is on his knees
Yeah.
begging for God's mercy because he's such a screw up. And
Mm-hmm.
God feels closest to that person because
Right.
their heart is pure. They know they need Him and that they're not Him, right? And then the
Yes.
second point in your story, when we're rejected and shamed by others, is when we are closest to Jesus,
Yeah.
because He was rejected and shamed for us. And
Absolutely.
we're actually unified in His suffering at that moment.
Yeah.
Speak to one or both of those points, would you?
Yeah. God draws close to the sinner. I believe it. I've experienced it. Um, and um, and I think in those moments where I was so broken and I was told that God wasn't near, there was almost like a fight, you know, for God to be present. It felt like God was fighting to speak a different message,
Mm,
like my community was speaking this message, but God was fighting to speak this other message, saying that I'm near, I'm present. This is the moment, this is the point of your life. I will do my greatest work in you. So I don't want these people out here to mess it up. Okay. And I felt like God was so protective over that point of my life, so very protective. I mean, to the point where I believe God uprooted me from that community and led me to Texas. Okay. That's how protective He was. Because He's like, this one here, this point here in her life, I will use it and have the greatest good on humanity if I can protect her and nurture her from the harm that this community could do to her right now. And so God was so present, so nurturing, so comforting, so encouraging. Um, and even after I had my son, it wasn't shame I felt gratitude. It was just like, why would God choose me? I always reflect on the story of Mary as a young teenager, pregnant, without being married. I'm like, I don't know if people reading the Bible know how earth shattering that is for a teenage woman to be pregnant without being married. And so I always,
In the Jewish community, which is
in the Jewish
like,
community.
yeah, that's like stone her to death consequences.
Yes. I mean, I watched the show Orthodox on
Mm.
Netflix to see how rigid, a community similar could be to a young woman who dared to have a voice and say, "Yes, Lord, do to me whatever you will." I mean, I don't think people realize how, even today in 2020, how difficult it is for a woman to bring life
Mm.
um, to earth. So I believe God is near. God is near to the brokenhearted and poor in spirit. God is always near. I believe that where you will find God at in power and in his most powerful form is with those that are in desperate need, those that are crying out, the marginalized, those that um, people have rejected and people have, demeaned and people have overlooked. I think that's where we will see God, which is why my ministry is around people who are in need, who are marginalized, because I want to be near where God is, and where God is with those that are desperately seeking and desperately needing Him. Even if they don't realize that they need Him, um, God shows up.
Julia, if one of my listeners right now is being touched by God in their heart right now, feeling compelled, saying, man, I want to serve those who are marginalized, those who are outcast. Where do they find them specifically? Like, what does that even look like? Do you go out on the street and just say hi to a homeless person? Like, what did you do to get started if someone wants to get started and God's striking their heart right now?
I would say move, move to where the hurt is. And the hurt is everywhere around us. The pain is everywhere. It's locally, it's nationally, it's internationally. Um, for me, when I moved to Texas, I started in doing prison work with women, just prison ministry, and it's free to go there. I mean, if your heart is meaning well, I started in prison ministry. I started just sitting with women once a week and started sharing my story. My first lesson to the women was her story, my story, our story, because we're interconnected in our stories of pain and suffering. So I would say, yeah, don't wait for the marginalized to come to you. Go to them, especially if you're in a position of privilege. You have money, you have a place to live. The more money we have, the more our fences will go up, so the marginalized won't find us. We have to go to them because we have privilege. And I would say, don't be afraid to engage the marginalized. I think we will hear a lot of myths about marginalized communities, whether it be immigrants, people in prison, people who are living on the margins of life, that they are rapists and they're this and they're that. They will steal from you, they will ruin you. And those are all myths. The kindest and most gentle people I met were in prison.
Hmm.
you know the most sensitive people I met were in prison. They were in jail behind bars. And so I would say, don't listen to the myths telling us to protect ourselves, protect our children. That's the myth of fear, that keeps us away from doing the work of serving others. I would say, continue to move towards and push through the fears. Push through the fears. Don't let fear hold you back from serving. And one of my big, I love women like um Harriet Tubman, Mother Teresa, you know, all of these freedom writers, women who pushed through fears. I'm sure they were afraid. We've read Mother Teresa's writings of how she felt the presence of God wasn't with her. She pushed through. Harriet Tubman, I mean, she gave her life. She could have possibly be killed. So there is a position you get with God where it becomes less about protecting your resources, protecting your children, protecting your goods, and just dying to all of that and serving others. Like Richard Rohr was saying, the second half of life is no longer about creating these high walls and these buildings and becoming successful. You realize that success means serving others and just giving to others and being present with others and being present with God.
I remember my friend prayed a prayer when he finally gave the second half of his life to God. And it was simply, God, I've spent my whole life serving myself, glorifying myself. I'm going to spend the rest of my life serving and glorifying you. And that's that first chapter, second chapter of your life right there, that moment. Right. So thank you for sharing that story. Really powerful, BC Nation. 3 quick spiritual insights from Dieula is: number 1, move to where the hurt is. Number 2, don't be afraid to engage those who are hurting. Don't buy into the fear myths. And number 3, don't let fear hold you back from serving. Like, give it to God. Trust He is your Father. He will protect you when you serve those who are least fortunate. You serve Him, as Jesus says. So we're speaking with Dieula Previlon. You can find her at DieulasPrevilon.com. Dieula, welcome to my favorite part of the show. Welcome to the confession round. This is where I'm going to ask you 10 quick fire questions. You'll have about 3 seconds to answer each. Don't overthink it. It's just for fun. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. What is your favorite thing about God?
His love.
What is your least favorite thing about God?
Silence.
His love and that is powerful. I agree. What are you most afraid of?
Dying without accomplishing my passions.
Got it. And I believe we're all struggling with something at any given moment of our life. What are you struggling with right now, either professionally or personally, that you could share with BC Nation?
Fear of not living close to my family.
Got that. What did you spend way too much time doing in your 20s?
Partying.
What secret fear do you have about people?
That they want too much from me and I can't deliver.
What do you wish you had learned sooner about God?
To be still. It's in the stillness He talks.
I agree with that. What's a new habit you want to create?
Silence, to listen to God.
Exactly. And what's a bad habit you want to break?
Over talking.
Got it. Pick 3 words to describe who you are now.
3 words. Caring, loving, tenacious.
Yeah. Pick 3 words to describe who you were before you experienced God in your life and surrendered the second part of your life to Him.
Selfish, self-absorbed, sensitive. Yeah, too sensitive.
Like overly sensitive. I get that.
Yes.
And last question, if you could come back to life, look your family and friends, your husband, your 3 sons in the eye, and give them only one piece of advice about everything, God, life, eternity, all of it, what would you say to them?
Don't hold nothing back.
Don't hold nothing back.
Yeah.
That's a good way to die and leave this world, right? Empty.
That's right.
Any final wisdom? What's the one thing you want my listener to know about having that relationship with God and giving Him the second half of their life versus not?
And don't overthink it. Let God be. Let Him speak to you in the silence and the stillness of life, in those little areas that of your heart that you don't want to confess to God. Let him in those little places, and that's where you will do your greatest work with God, in those quiet, dark, silence places in your life.
Powerful. And what's the
Yeah.
best way for BC Nation to get in touch with you if they so choose?
On my website, DieulaPrevilon.com. You can find me there. You'll find my emails and ways to contact me.
Fantastic. Dieula, thank you so much for being on Broken Catholic. I wish you God's love, peace, and joy in your life, my dear.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you.
Cheers. BC Nation, you cannot show up authentically in your life without building faith in your business. If you want the business side of that conversation, I have another podcast called First 100K, where I interview successful entrepreneurs about how they made their first $100,000, because that's where I believe 90% of you are stuck and you can't break through. Go to first100k.com to find out how. I'm Joseph Warren. You were made for greatness, so stop being a wuss and start being a winner. Have a blessed day, and I'll see you right back here next week.